Hey man, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Nice to be back on your pod again, Peter.
Mate, it's nice to have you back. We discussed a peaceful revolution last time, and
Yeah. I had to defend libertarianism without even identifying as a libertarian, or maybe I do.
just did you see what I tweeted this morning?
Did I? That's a good question. Which one of them?
Well, it's just interesting that you brought that up as an opening thing, because one of the things I'm really wrestling with right now is that I tend to read a lot of the YouTube comments on my podcast, and the reason I read them, they
Hmm.
give me a good sense of feedback on ideas, opinions, and topics I should explore. And one of the really interesting things is that whenever I cover a particular form of governance, whether it's anarchism, libertarianism, you know, statism, which is used pejoratively these days, there are always a bunch of people piling in with criticisms of it. And trying to figure out governance is one of the trickiest, most complicated subjects I think of our time right now, because
Yeah.
you have people who are on the left, on the right, statists, anarchists, libertarians, and they all believe their form of governance is right. Even when I was in El Salvador, I was having dinner with this girl who was even defending Marxism. So everyone always has their form of governance they think is best, and everything else is shit. And trying to navigate that's so hard, man.
Yeah, I think the trick is to find the tools to emancipate yourself. That's an important thing. I really enjoyed your
Yeah,
interview with Katie the Russian. Uh,
yeah, Katie
uh,
the Russian.
yeah, she's
Well, it's
she's
tempting.
amazing.
She is, and it's very tempting to get a second passport. I, I mean, just from my experience of traveling around the world and trying to get access to different countries and seeing how different countries treat each other. I'm particularly looking right now at Cuba. I'm particularly looking at specifically Belarus, with what's happened with the targeting of uh, the athlete in the Olympics who came out and said criticized the team and they tried to forcibly put her on a plane back to Belarus and punish her. I'm thinking particularly of the guy in Ukraine who was just found dead, who suspiciously committed suicide. Perhaps it was disguised as a
Yeah,
suicide, and he ran I'm not sure if it was a company or an organization, but helping people flee Belarus and Lukashenko's dictatorship. Now, I'm consciously aware of all different forms of governance, from you know democratic republics, democracies, to authoritarian regimes, to monarchies. You can travel and see everything, right? And
the,
trying to navigate what is best is really fucking hard.
it is. Was that a Freudian slip, like Democratic Republic /
Yeah,
democracy?
it was a slip.
Yeah,
Well, it's when people refer to the US as a democracy, others will snap back and say, no,
no,
it's a federal republic. Is it a federal republic?
it's a dictatorship with two dictators instead of one. You still have to pick.
Constitutional republic. Sorry, this is where
Yeah,
people.
yeah. Constitutional republic. Yeah, that's
Constitutional republic. There's a lot I like about the US. I do like the optionality
yeah,
you have to move
yeah.
between states for different forms of governance, but also the federal government is fucking shit.
Yeah, speaking of that, I'm planning to take the car down through Europe in a couple of weeks, and there are so many different rules for what you need in the car between like Sweden and Germany and France and Spain and Italy, and all the different countries have different rules, and it's really hard. It's much easier to move around in the US.
I think in France, don't you? In France, you need a breathalyzer.
A breathalyzer. I have to look into that. I have 3 days.
Yeah, I drove through France. I had to drive my dad to Spain once because he won't get on planes. When we went to scatter my mum's ashes in Spain, I had to drive him. And I'm pretty sure with France, I had to have. I bought a kit in the end, but I'm pretty sure there was like breathalyzers. there was like the warning danger sign you have to have if you have a breakdown. Like I'm perfectly aware of that, but no, like this is like the thing I'm wrestling with most right now: governance and how you what form of governance is best for everyone. And being in a world of Bitcoiners is very hard if you ever show any support for the ideas behind any form of democracy.
Yeah, well, I think regardless of what type of governance or no governance that you prefer, everyone views like competition between this different types of governance as sort of a good thing. Like you want the best ideas to survive and the worst ideas to go away as quickly as possible. So the thing that Kate is doing there, for instance, like perfectly legally giving people the opportunity to get a second passport and like surf the different jurisdictions. That's like putting pressure on the government that loses the entrepreneur to the other country, right? So and all the incentives are aligned.
I mean, it's a great option to have.
It is.
How many people can actually do that? Firstly, how many can, one, afford it, two, have the life circumstances that allow it? So firstly, affording it it's expensive. I think she was saying like $150,000.
Yeah, so something like that.
That's way more than the average salary for most people. So let's be honest, that's only an option available to high income earners who usually have a way of finding they're usually capable of finding ways to avoid tax anyway, if that's one of the primary reasons.
Yeah.
And secondly, if you've got kids, you can't be a digital nomad with kids easily. I know some people do it, but most people actually just want to be settled. They want their kids to be in a school with other kids they can hang out with, and they just want that kind of stability. So whilst it provides that competition with government, I'm not sure how much pressure it puts on, because I'm not sure. I think it's a very small group of people it's open to.
Yeah, but it's only one form of pressure. There's pressure on governments from other vectors as well. I mean, Bitcoin, to begin with, is a huge force, like forcing governments to. Well, it seems like they're getting worse because of it, but I don't really know how this will play out in the next 10 years. But it will be weird.
If the J curve plays out, then we will see. We'll get to that, because you've been, was it 3 books you've now written?
No, well, the first one wasn't really a book; it was just a compilation of articles. So that was like a prototype.
It's a book.
It was called.
Is it bound? Does it have a front cover?
Yeah, it does. So I guess you could call it a book.
It's a book. It's a book.
Yeah.
Okay, well, listen. Look, you've been making videos with our friend Guy Swan, who has the voice of Bitcoin. You've been working hard at spreading the knowledge. We should dig into this, because I think this is a nice follow-on from what we spoke about last time. Mm-hmm. So just to link back to what I was saying at the start, like I'm struggling with governance. Democracy is a very hard thing. Any form of statism is a very hard thing to defend in the world of Bitcoiners, but exploring anarchism and libertarianism is easy. And I had a sit down with Michael Malice, and we had a great chat, and I loved everything he said. I appreciate everything he said. I think his vision of the world is a world I can buy into.
It is.
My difficulty is understanding how we get there. The gap between the idea on paper and the reality is quite a tricky one. And I know many people say, well, Bitcoin fixes this, but to be seen. I don't think, I think we've got many battles ahead with the state regarding this. And it's similar with hyperbitcoinization. It's something that gets spoken about a lot. But the gap between where we are and how we get to hyperbitcoinization and what actually that means is another thing I don't fully understand. So I'm definitely interested in exploring it with you.
Yeah, no one understands what hyperbitcoinization implies. I mean, it's literally impossible to wrap your head around because there's no end point to it. And this is the point I'm trying to make in the video. And shout out to Joni Appelberg, who actually makes the actual videos. I mean, he does the...
Shout out, Joni.
Yeah, he does the bulk of the work there. And I just write the stuff and the guys one reads it. But Yoni is the animator. Anyway, the point to that video was that there's no end point to hyper-Bitcoinization. And the how we get there perspective is like we can't get there without Bitcoin. We can all agree on that, right? Before Bitcoin, there was really no point to being a libertarian or an anarcho-capitalist, because the majority of the people don't seem to want that. They want to be governed. They want to be on a leash for all their lives. At least that's what the election results reflect. That's how I interpret it anyway. So basically, that means they don't really know what's best for themselves, because they don't see how much money and how much energy that gets wasted in the system we've got today. But yeah, where to start about the J-shaped thing?
I think a good starting point is network effects, as you started in the video. I mean, some of this, like similar J-curve technologies, radio phones, televisions, computers, internet, etc., cell phones, they're all highly relevant to this, and Bitcoin fits within that list. And I've mentioned it on the show before, but there's a really good book called Engines Which Move Markets, and it refers to the internet, the railroads, electricity, light bulbs, etc., and how they fundamentally shifted society in terms of organization and economically. And I've always felt like that book could be rewritten at some point with a chapter dedicated to Bitcoin.
That sounds like a good idea. When it comes to network technologies, there's something called Metcalfe's law. I'm sure you're aware of this, but it's like the value of the network is equal to the square of the number of users the network has. Which means that if you have one telephone and if two people have one telephone each, they have one person to call. If three people have a telephone each, they each have two people to call, and so on and so forth. So it gets exponentially better the bigger the value of the network grows exponentially as the network grows bigger. And what this tends to do with successful network technologies is that they have an S-shaped adoption curve, which means that it starts slowly, but as all exponentials do, there's a point where there's a catch-up effect where it all happens suddenly because it doubles every day, and the end point is when everyone on Earth is onboarded to the technology. And this happened to radio and telephones and Google and Facebook and the internet and all the network technologies that were successful happened this way. And like nowadays, everyone has a smartphone, everyone has some form of social media accounts, everyone has access to email. All of these things grew exponentially and then leveled out at the end. And I believe Bitcoin is in the middle of this, somewhere along. I don't know how many users, how high a percentage of the world's population that use Bitcoin at the moment. I think it's something around 0.05% or something. I haven't heard a figure in a while, but this figure doubles at certain intervals, which means that sooner or later everyone will use Bitcoin in some way, shape, or form. And but that is the adoption of the technology. But the price curve is another thing, because that follows another pattern. Because when everyone on Earth has Bitcoin, there's really no reason for them to stop putting money into Bitcoin. And if people keep on dollar cost averaging in all of this, that means that all the monetary energy that gets produced over time, that gets funneled into Bitcoin, the economy grows larger and larger until it eats everything. And it doesn't stop there. And that's the most fascinating part to me, because say we live in a hyper-Bitcoinized world. Everyone on Earth uses Bitcoin as their main currency. It's currently the sixth largest currency in the world, so it's getting there. But say you live in a world where all the other currencies are basically pointless because everyone uses Bitcoin, and El Sonte is everywhere. And you can use Lightning as easily as in El Sonte, or even more easily everywhere on the earth. Then what that enables is a global sound money free market economy, which by definition is much, much, much more effective than our current system, because we live in sort of a handicapped free market economy, because interventionism is everywhere. Fiat currencies are everywhere. The Cantillon effect is everywhere. What this means practically is that resources get misallocated everywhere. So all the supply chains, everything in society has to like battle all these hurdles along the way to get as effective as they could be if we had a global sound money free market economy. But they don't, because there are so many resources are misallocated. And this slows down all the processes, including the processes of switching to a renewable energy system and everything. It gets the price signals get distorted and resources are misallocated. In a sound money economy, only the investments that actually survive on the free market survive, and no one gets bailed out. No one gets new loans, new cheaper loans because they sit closer to the money spigot. We'll have none of that, and it will be much harder to
fairer system.
Yeah, a much fairer system, and it's much harder to use force to make people do things. Because a transaction is a voluntary thing at its core, and everything we do is trade. We trade information with each other right now while talking. I talk about this all the time, but if we could funnel all that into Bitcoin, we'll have a much fairer world, and back to the price. That means that the purchasing power of Bitcoin goes up and up and up, and there's no stopping point, because the actual cost of everything else is lowered even more rapidly after everyone is onboarded. Jeff Booth talks about this a lot, with how cheap everything is to produce nowadays. There's basically zero marginal cost for producing whatever you want to produce, and there's like transportation costs are going down as well, as long as you don't have big container ships clogging the Suez Canal and stuff like that. But on the whole, transportation costs and production costs for every product there is going down. A product is just a service, by the way. Oh, I'm getting into too many subjects at the same time here. But the point is, after everyone is onboarded,
I'm keeping notes.
After everyone is onboarded, in the purchasing power of a Bitcoin can only keep on going up as long as the economy grows, and the economy grows as long as people do stuff and help each other and do stuff that other people want. There's no end to this. It's too good to be true, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around what such a world may look like, but. I'm only sure of one thing, and that is that it will be a hell of a lot better world than what we live in now, where everyone's in debt and and if you look at the distribution of Bitcoin among users, the whales are actually losing power to the plebs, like users that have 10 Bitcoin.
That's what
or
Willie
less.
told me.
Yeah, exactly. Willie talks about this a lot, and he's been looking at the numbers and number crunching these things and looking at all the data, and like the amount of users with 10 Bitcoin or less is growing. The amount of users with 1 Bitcoin or less is also growing, and the big whales with like 10,000 Bitcoin or more, that is shrinking. So Bitcoin is doing what all the central banks claim to be doing. Even though it works like Bitcoin is the literal opposite of what a central bank is, and it's doing what the central bank says it's doing. So I find this so fascinating.
Yeah, well, that harps to my first note that I wrote, because you mentioned Bitcoin being the sixth largest currency in the world now. But if you look at that table,
By market cap.
yeah, by market cap. But if you look at that list of currencies, it is the most unique currency amongst it, because it's the only currency that has a fixed limit, and it's the only currency that encourages prudence rather than spending. Yeah, when I was younger, my parents were savers. They talked about savings. They had good interest rates in the banks. Now, if you keep money in the bank, you're losing purchasing power. You're lucky if you get like 0.1% interest, right? So you're encouraged to spend, because otherwise you lose purchasing power. Now, look, some people will save anyway because they want to save for whatever reason. But the point being is Bitcoin is so unique. So there is that encouragement to be prudent. And what that makes me think is like hyperbitcoinization really is, maybe it's not a collective term, it's an individual experience where you hyperbitcoinize yourself.
It is.
Because I have Bitcoin now as my personal standard. Yeah, Saverteam talks about Bitcoin standard. Now, when we were on a gold standard, it required others to be on the same standard. It required nations to agree to a gold standard. But with Bitcoin, I don't have to worry about whether you're on a Bitcoin standard or not, or whether my neighbor is or not. It's a personal experience. No. I hold Bitcoin personally. I hold it with the business. I make my purchase decisions based on whether I want to lose any of my sats. So perhaps hyperbitcoinization is just an experience you go through as an individual. As you go down the rabbit hole, you learn more. You hyperbitcoinize yourself, and we don't collectively need everyone to do it.
No, that's exactly right. It's as Michael Jackson said: if you want to change the world, take a look at yourself. Which maybe he should have done a bit more. But anyway, the thing is that Bitcoin is just an agreement between people that these rules are fair. That's all it is. All we're doing when we're using Bitcoin, when we're hodling Bitcoin, or when we're spending Bitcoin, whatever we do with them, we agree to the terms of the network. And you can do that to different degrees. I mean, you can deep dive into all the technical details. You can learn about multi-sig and coin joins and whatever you wish to do. It's a tool. It's right there on the table in front of you. You can use it if you want to. You can choose not to use it if you want to. But if you don't agree with the rules of the protocol, you can't have any of the benefits. I tweeted this back at Peter Schiff the other day, by the way, because what he seems to not get is that Bitcoin, all Bitcoin is a bunch of people agreeing on a fixed set of rules. And it's so embedded in every Bitcoiner's head now that these rules, the basics of it, like the halvenings every 4 years, the 10-minute block intervals set by the difficulty adjustment algorithm, the 21 million coin limit and issuance cap, all of these things are in all of our minds, and you need to change all of our minds at the same time in order to change Bitcoin, and you can't do that. It's there, and you have to live with that now. Everyone on Earth has to live with the fact that Bitcoin exists, and you can't stop it because it's an idea. It's an intersubjective idea. We all know about this thing. We all know the basics, and we agree that it's fair. And how do you stop people from agreeing on a subject? Like, you can try to by forking away or promoting this and that. But sooner or later, as you know, every Bitcoiner has this journey through the shit coins and through the like statist tendencies and like, oh, can they regulate away this? And oh, can't they just change the protocol? And then you realize that Bitcoin is nothing but an agreement between Bitcoiners that we use this in this way. We use the block times instead of universal time. We think in a certain way.
Yeah, because you either come to accept it or Bitcoin spits you out. But you can't change it. I mean, Roger Ver
Exactly.
tried to change it, it spat him out, and he's gone from Bitcoin, and it's done it to so many people. And it was really interesting because I was having a conversation with Parker Lewis yesterday about it. It's that the more you attack Bitcoin, in which any way it can be, like whether it's a fork or through regulations or through China banning mining, you only ever make Bitcoin stronger because it responds to each attack.
Yeah.
It's quite, in some ways, it's malleable in that it's like an organism that responds to it. So let's talk about mining as the example. China bans it; those miners just move to other jurisdictions. So there are aspects of it which are really hard, but there are other aspects of it which are quite malleable.
Yeah, and mining. What is mining? It's guessing a number, and every Bitcoiner agrees
needle
that
in a haystack.
if we guess this, if you find the needle in the haystack, you found it, and you can prove that you found it because the hash of the block has a certain number of zeros ahead of it in the beginning of the hash, and that's all it is, and we all agree that that's how it functions. And that's all we need. So banning mining or like fighting Bitcoin, these terms make no sense to me, and they should make sense to anyone, because you can point a gun at 2 + 2, it will still equal 4, and you can try to change Bitcoin, but Bitcoin honey badger won't care. It's the same thing.
Well, this is why I struggle sometimes with the Ethereum people, and this isn't a debate about whether Ethereum should exist or not, or what its future plans are and whether it can move to proof of stake. Forget all that to one side. Like, I accept Ethereum exists. I accept some people get value from it and they like it. Fine, that's not an issue. I don't. It's not for me, right? But I accept that. But to argue that Ethereum is better money than Bitcoin, when Bitcoin is sound money, has had a fixed monetary policy for its existence. It is 21 million fixed. It is halving every 4 years. It's never once had to change its monetary policy. Whereas Ethereum, I think on a handful of occasions has changed its monetary policy. It's now going to EIP, is it 1559, which is another change, which my fundamental understanding is that it's trying to give Ethereum more value. But if you have a monetary policy which is that flexible, how can it be harder money? How can you? It's quite disingenuous to call it ultrasound money when people are referring to Bitcoin as sound money with a monetary policy that changes. You might be able to argue, say, well, Ethereum is better money because you have the ability to create smart contracts in a way you can't with Bitcoin. It's has a Turing complete language, by the way, which has its own trade-offs. But all right, fair. There are things you can do on Ethereum that perhaps you can't do on Bitcoin. Fine, you can have that argument, but you cannot argue that it's sounder money, because the ability to create dApps is not what makes something sound money. What makes something sound money is that you can trust it, that it's fair, that its monetary policy isn't going to change at the whim of others. So I find that when Ethereum people argue that it's better than Bitcoin, I find that fundamentally disingenuous.
It is. It's. You can go even further than that. Ethereum is in a way also an agreement between the users of Ethereum that they agree to subscribe to the rules of Ethereum, but the rules of Ethereum are like, it is a centralized entity that decides the rules. That's the rules. There's no decentralization to Ethereum at all. And all you can do with it, basically, or everything that people are using it for, is creating new shitcoins. And now that there's like there's a new suggestion to changing the protocol so that people that cancel their contracts, their smart contracts, will get rewarded for removing them from the blockchain and rewriting the blockchain. And what's the point of having a blockchain at all if it works that way? That's the thing. There's no point to a blockchain if it's not Bitcoin, basically, because if you don't have the decentralization and if you don't all agree on the rules, if there are no rules to agree on, there's no point to having a blockchain. And people have been saying this for years, but people keep falling for it. And it's because these terms, cryptos and everything, it's like Jack Mallers is talking about this, about what's he called, Brian Armstrong and Coinbase, how he chose the path of making money off of gullible people instead of going straight to the bottom, like with the exchange price for Bitcoin into other currencies and saying like, okay, well, you can exchange them for free and we'll have to make money some other way. Because what it's basically doing is it's like bunching people, like putting Bitcoin into the same category as all of these casino scams that are 99% of them are designed for one specific purpose, and that's to deprive you of your Bitcoin, and enrich a few people on top of the pyramid scheme. By the way, the next video we're working on is about shitcoins and how they can be divided into two categories. And the first category is Crapto-currencies, which are all the other so-called cryptos. And the second category is Klepto-currencies, which are all the fiat currencies. Because they have yeah, it's a term I'm trying to introduce here. And kleptocurrencies and cryptocurrencies. You should know your shitcoins. Everything that isn't Bitcoin is basically a shitcoin at this point. There's no competition anymore in money, and there doesn't need to be, because
I try and be as fair as I can with this and as objective as I can. So I think calling everything a scam is an issue, because I think there needs to be some separation. So, for example, I consider OneCoin a scam. That was an actual scam designed just to steal from people, and to call everything a scam doesn't separate the different incentive structures what was built. But I think there are outright scams such as OneCoin, which is an absolute scam. I do believe there are attempts at rethinking Bitcoin, which are failures, and I consider those projects. I don't believe Roger Ver set out to scam people. I think he fundamentally believed that the base chain should be for all transactions, and it was a test, and he was proven wrong. That's what I think. I don't think he's done some, like, don't get me wrong, he's done some things that I don't agree with, but I don't think he said, let's create Bitcoin Cash to scam people. No. I think he created it as a project because he believed that's what Bitcoin should have been.
But the thing he did was he misinterpreted what the invention was about, or what the discovery of digital scarcity was about, because that's what it was. Humanity discovered, or Satoshi Nakamoto discovered, absolute digital scarcity, or I don't like the term digital really, but absolute scarcity, absolute mathematical scarcity, let's call it that. And praxeological scarcity, a way for people to agree upon a fixed set of rules that couldn't be changed, that ensured that the money supply could not be increased. He solved the double spending problem, basically. And when that exists, everything else becomes a shitcoin. I view it as, but as you say, there are different levels in hell. So it's a bit like religions. They're not all equally bad. Some are more destructive than others, and you shouldn't just say that religion is one thing, because there are different levels of, like, people can be religiously wacko from zero to start raving mad, whatever crackpot religion you. Anyway, because I view Bitcoin as monetary atheism, and I know I get a lot of shit for this, but I think that the verifiability of it, like, I choose to not believe in the other coins because I choose to believe in something, or rather, I choose to believe as little as possible and verify as much as possible. And that's what Bitcoin enables me to do. There are ways for me to check that people are following the rules by running my own node, and by learning more about it. It's more easy for me to see that we're all playing a fair game here.
Yeah, and, look, I don't disagree.
So I'm not saying that the others are all scams. I'm just saying that I don't buy into them, and they might as well be scams, all of them. I don't know. There are different levels of scamminess, but if you claim that you discovered absolute scarcity again, you're probably a scammer. There's why would anyone want to do that to begin with? If we already found this thing, why would we want to dilute it? The whole point is that it's undilutable. Why would you want to dilute it by introducing more and more other shitty tokens? I don't know. And there's no such thing as a digital token, by the way. There's only ledgers.
Yeah.
So
well,
it's just an agreement.
I think it's a complicated subject. I definitely think nuance is important. As we went through the block size wars, there were many smart people invested in Bitcoin, been involved in a long time, who believed that bigger blocks were important. There was a time when I was newer to Bitcoin, and I heard the arguments, and I was like, yeah, bigger blocks make sense. I wasn't trying to scam people. I just believed.
Did you read the book?
Sense. Which book?
The Block Size Wars.
No, I haven't read it yet. But funny enough, I've got it planned to read because I'm going off on holiday next week, and I'm planning to read it. But the point I'm trying to make is that when I thought, bigger blocks make more sense, I wasn't trying to scam people. I just thought it made more sense. I bought into the arguments for that period of time. Now I don't. Obviously now I don't. And I think it was the debate between Roger Ver and Jameson Lopp on the Tom Woods show, which convinced me that I was like, okay, no, the smaller blocks make sense. And in hindsight, it makes a lot more sense. But what I'm saying is, I think it's important to be fair to people and classify these things. It's a bit like Ethereum. Like, again, going back to that, whether or not you think people involved in Ethereum are scammers or not, I think there are people who are trying to build things on Ethereum that they think are useful. I think they're dumb, but they find use in them. Yield earning products, lending services. Just bear with me, because I think it's important to say, it's like, I'm a Bitcoiner. I only hold Bitcoin. I've got no interest in other subjects. But I just find that if we call everything else a scam, we miss the nuance of the debate, and we miss the nuance on what actually is a scam and what isn't. And therefore, I think we actually give cover to actual scams.
But whenever you talk about nuance and stuff like this, you legitimize projects that try to push a narrative that there's a point to replicating absolute scarcity, and there isn't.
Well, that's only on the cryptocurrencies which are claiming to compete with Bitcoin to offer absolute scarcity. But there are others who are trying to do other things.
What else? But what else is there? Like, what else is there to introduce that wouldn't work better if it was centralized? Like, centralized projects can still be centralized. You can still sell gift cards, even though Bitcoin exists, which are totally centralized, and that doesn't matter. You can still do all these things. It's just that whenever you introduce a blockchain or like a crypto or when you use all these words that were used to describe Bitcoin in the beginning, you confuse people because they think that the way they think, newcomers think about Bitcoin is wrong from the beginning, because they think that there's like a competition between these, and there really isn't.
I think it's intention. I think if you're scamming someone, you are intentionally and aware that you're scamming somebody. And this, by the way, I'm in total. You've got to remember, I'm in total agreement with you about Bitcoin. What I'm saying is, I don't believe there are everybody out there working on altcoin projects are intentionally scamming people. I think they believe they are building something useful. And that's why I think it's important, because we're giving cover otherwise.
You have to play the devil's advocate as well. But I don't believe they're all scammers intentionally. Of course not. I believe many of them are just confused. And I like, people may do what they like, and they may believe in what they like. What I dislike is when this magnificent discovery of Bitcoin gets confused with all of these other semi-scammy projects, and even though if they're intentionally scams or not doesn't really matter, because the result is the same. People who choose to invest in these things instead of Bitcoin will lose money over time, will lose purchasing power over time.
And again, that's not entirely true. there are plenty of traders out there who will invest in these projects on different timescales and will earn more Bitcoin.
Yeah, but
I think what you're saying is
what's the
over
percent?
time, as on a long enough time frame, price against Bitcoin, they always lose.
Yeah, and but when it comes to the traders, it's a bit like the poker boom in the beginning of the century. Only a tiny fraction of them actually make money from trading. All the others lose money. Most of them lose money because day trading is really hard. And furthermore, in what way do currency traders contribute to the progress of humanity? What good do they? How are they good for civilization as a whole? Oh, I don't really see that. All they're doing is like making money off of other people not making money, because someone has to lose the trade and someone has to win it when it's between different currencies, right? So I don't really see the point in that. Of course, some people do it and make money off it, but if you tell people that day trading is a good idea and they should follow all this technical analysis and learn all that stuff, you're sort of missing. Like, why aren't they producing something valuable instead and selling it instead of just buying something that they think that other people will buy at a certain other time and sell at some time? I mean,
well, but
there's
I
no
think
real
we have to be
value
honest.
there.
Well, again, I don't think that's right. I think there are people who are getting value from Ethereum. I think it is providing things to some people that are getting value from it.
Name one.
Stable coins. If people are able to use stable coins on Ethereum to trade in and out of Bitcoin on exchanges that don't have banking services.
Okay, and what do stablecoin? Okay, so they enable some people that couldn't buy Bitcoin to buy Bitcoin. Is that it?
Well, I'm just saying. You asked for an example. There's an example of someone getting. They've built something that people are getting value from.
But stablecoins are like, first of all, some of them are really scammy in themselves. Like, how many tethers are there? Are they really whatever? And but what they are only the word stable coin is sort of an oxymoron, because the only reason that the dollar is stable is that it's dishonest, because prices
but this is a different
aren't
point.
Stable.
Yeah, but that's a different point. Your point is whether or not stable coins are stable because of your criticism of the fiat currency that it represents. The point you made was, are people building something of value? People are getting value from having the ability to use stable coins to buy and sell Bitcoin. So they've built something. If people are using it, they've built something of value.
But who benefits from the value of creating a stable coin? The currency traders, saying, right?
Well, no. Anyone who wants to buy Bitcoin who can't access banking services from an exchange, or the exchange doesn't support banking services, so they have to use a stable coin. So, for example, I think Tether was introduced early on because the first exchanges couldn't get banking services, so they introduced Tether so people could trade in and out of Bitcoin. So that's something that has provided value to people over the years. I think it's hard to argue against that. That's not the point of whether it's a different argument, I think, to criticize the value of a stablecoin itself because fiat currencies themselves are shit, but they've built something of value. Also, there's the ability for people. There's people who are able to get loans and earn yield on some of these things. By the way, I don't use it and I never would, but they're using it and they're getting value from it.
But the value you're speaking of is basically that it enables some people to acquire Bitcoin.
Well, no, it's more than that. Some people are able to take out loans and earn yield using other cryptocurrencies, and they get value from that. I mean, value is subjective to the user.
Yes, of course, but all these things, all these financial things that you can do, you can leverage this, and you can short that, and you can buy in and out of that. It's not really contributing anything to the world. Like Bitcoin, to me, that's a different point. I don't come from a trading perspective, so I'm not. So I'm not an expert here. I'm just saying that the overall value, if they had focused on Bitcoin only and like acquiring Bitcoin for something they did, they would provide more value to society as a whole than just playing these casino games of the financial world.
But again, I think you're making a different
That's my
point.
point.
You're talking about the morality of these projects and what they do to better the world. And that's a different point than saying, does it provide value? Like, are we talking about net value to the world or net value to the individual? If it's
value. Oh, okay. I have an answer for that, and that is value actually created and just not scammed out of someone else, because like
again,
enriching yourself, it's not creating value. It's if it's at the expense of anyone else, you're not. Sorry.
But all trading is, all trading can be at the expense of anyone else. People going onto any exchange, even a Bitcoin only exchange. So let's say something like River. If they're trading on River, they can you can buy and sell and lose dollar value. You can make mistakes and you can lose to somebody else's benefit. So if you're making, I think you're going down the road of making morality decisions about what is ethical and what is not.
Yes, and I think it's unethical to promote a behavior that most people will lose money by adopting. So
you think trading itself is unethical?
No, of course not. Trading is why trading in itself is of course not a bad thing. It's voluntary exchange between people, and you shouldn't try to stop it by the thing is, trading between currencies is like when you have the perfect currency, trading between other currencies just to enrich yourself, it doesn't really contribute anything to anyone. It's just, and these people that claim that it does, the sort of dishonest, it's hard to articulate this, but the framing is wrong. Oh.
Well, I think it's hard to articulate, and I don't know how people will respond to this. They might give me a kick, or they might agree, but I think it's one of these problems we get when we go down part of the Bitcoin maximalist kind of rabbit hole, is that it's almost impossible to accept anything else. It becomes really difficult to accept anything else once you're a Bitcoin maximalist, because there's a couple of things. Firstly, you run the risk of people yelling at you, canceling you, shouting at you. Like even me in this conversation, given this mild acceptance to Ethereum, runs the risk of people going, "Oh, Pete's a shitcoiner now. Pete's going to promote shitcoins. His podcast is going to support Ethereum." Like I go that risk of people yelling at me, but sometimes you have to just try and be intellectually honest with yourself. And your point was like, are these people creating something of value? I would argue that it's almost impossible to argue against the fact that when the people have built Tether, they've built something that is useful for Bitcoiners, and these and other stable coins that exist on alternative blockchains provide value to Bitcoiners. And but that to accept that means to accept maybe. that this maybe it's short term, but at the same time it becomes really difficult, because then we have to go, oh, okay, well, maybe Ethereum does have some value. It was a bit like the INX token. When that was launched, it was originally launched on Ethereum because Liquid wasn't ready. So those people who are Bitcoiners, essentially Bitcoin maximalists, realized at that moment in time that Ethereum blockchain could provide them what they needed. Or even recently, when Jack Mallers was building Strike, because he couldn't get certain banking services, they did part of it using Tether on, I think it was on Ethereum. So what I'm saying is, like, I'm happy to have the debate, but I think sometimes we have to be honest. Like, there are things out there that have provided value to people which aren't on Bitcoin. I think Ethereum's dumb. I have no long-term use for it, but I think we have to be honest about it.
Yeah, and I do too. But I think there's a big difference between being open-minded and being intellectually honest. Because, like, whenever you legitimize these other things, you claim that Tether had some use case. I would say that Tether, the people that benefit most from Tether are the people behind Tether, of course, because I think there are more Tethers around than they say there is, and it's built on Ethereum, and that was supposed to be a good thing because they could have just built it on nothing then, because it's a nothing burger if it's built on the Ethereum, because the rules of Ethereum can be changed at any point in time, and maybe some people got lucky and used it at the right time, and they could time the markets and get something for themselves out of it. I mean, I think Bitcoin Cash was a scam. I think it was deliberately there in order to get the ASIC boost running and everything, and miners could make more money from whatever technical blah blah blah. But I could still make some money off of selling my Bitcoin Cash for Bitcoin. So for me personally, it was good. But I don't think it provided anything of value to Bitcoin, except for maybe setting a precedent that wouldn't have.
See, I don't think it was.
Okay, I know what you're going to say.
Well, let me say it. So it's because it's 2 points. Firstly, is I don't think it was a scam. I think it was a disagreement. Okay, and I think it was a disagreement about scaling. That's what I think it was. I think some of the actions that people took in delivering it became scammy. But ultimately, I think it was a disagreement about scaling, and then the market proved which was right or wrong. I think it provided a huge amount for value for Bitcoin. I think it proved that forking Bitcoin will ultimately lead to failure.
Yeah.
And ultimately lead to people losing money. I think that it strengthened Bitcoin, and I think it strengthened the community, and I think it strengthened the network. And I think that was a huge amount of value. And somebody said it recently to me. They said, we'll probably look back on 2017 and be glad that the experience happened then, because we got to learn quite early on in the history of Bitcoin what happens when you try and fork it. We have so many forks and they all failed. There's almost no point forking Bitcoin anymore. It's obvious what's going to happen.
I agree with all of that, Peter. But still, all the people that believed in Bitcoin Cash because they misunderstood the point of decentralization and why the blocks needed to be small, so that people could run their own nodes. All of those people that were misled by these other entities, whether they were scammers or not, well, let's not go into that. But all of those people lost money in the process. And those of us that saw that the real the real Bitcoin is going to survive and this one is going to die out, we could make money off of those other people. So while I agree with you on all those points that it was probably good for Bitcoin in the long run, because people got a perfect example of what happens if you try to fork Bitcoin, and it's not a good idea, especially after it's split into separate forks in itself. Like a year later, you can see how easily these things are manipulated and how robust Bitcoin is. So I agree to all of that, but I still think that the credit is where credit's due, and the credit goes to Bitcoin for being so robust and for Bitcoiners for believing in the real moral values of this thing, and so there's no credit at all to the Bitcoin Cash people, because those are the ones that lost this battle, and it was good for Bitcoin because of Bitcoin and not because of Bitcoin Cash. That's
look,
that's how I view it.
Yeah, look, I don't entirely disagree. I think we're on a similar page, but I think it's important to look back on the history of these events and be kind of honest about what happened and why. And I don't think misunderstanding something makes you a scammer. I just think you misunderstand something. If your actions are, if you fail to readjust and then you mislead people or you lie, then you're a scammer. But at the time, if you misunderstand something, you just misunderstood something. And that's easy to do with it's quite complex things.
But in the start of this discussion, we didn't discuss if things were scams or not. We were discussing if there were shitcoins or not, which is there's a subtle difference between the two, because people can have honest intentions and still create a shitcoin. I mean, it's still shit. It will still lose value over time and provide more losses to more people. only a few will gain value from these things existing, and most people will just lose money trading them. So it's still a shitcoin, regardless of if it's intentionally a scam or not. I don't think the British pound was intended to be a scam, but it's still a shitcoin. I don't think the US dollar was intended to be a scam in the beginning, but nowadays it's a shitcoin.
What about the issuance of tokens in the future on Liquid, which are representations of ownership of a company? Are they shitcoins?
I haven't thought about that, so I don't have an answer for you there where I stand on those issues.
Because I have thought about that. I spoke
Mm-hmm.
to Eric Voorhees yesterday because he's decentralizing Shapeshift, and whatever people think of Eric Voorhees, I like talking to him because I've had a lot of interesting discussions about governance and libertarianism with him. And like, I'm not a user of Shapeshift. I'm not going to be buying the Fox token. I'm not going to be investing. But the idea of decentralizing a business and having a token which represents ownership and contribution towards the future of that project, I do find interesting. In a future world where we become more decentralized, if we were to break down the institutions which govern the ownership of companies, and we allowed people in a free market to decide how companies may be owned, and we might issue shares as tokens on a blockchain, say like Liquid, and maybe on a long enough time frame, it would be better to own Bitcoin than that token. But like shares, there's shares you can own in companies that will outperform Bitcoin on certain time frames. So I think I'm almost at that point where I'm feeling like the conversation regarding tokens, it needs to grow up a bit. We need to be a bit more mature about it and say, look, what is the future structure and ownership of companies, especially in a more decentralized world? Will we move towards tokens as representations of shares? Will they be issued on a blockchain or something like Liquid? Because it's important.
But are you talking about 10 years from now or 500 years from now?
I'm talking about could be a year from now.
Because
could be 5 years from now. It's already happening. INX have done it.
Oh. Well, this is getting tiresome. If the thing is, if it's about a token that represents value, a token representing value, that's sort of what money is like. It's I have this thing, and it's the most saleable good in society. By definition, becomes its money, right? So that's why gold became money back in the day, because it was saleable, because it was quite easy to verify and it was scarce. So it would hold this value over time. People could use it to exchange with other things. And if the game we're playing is money, there's only one winner, and the best type of money, the best form of money, is that winner. And that's what Bitcoin is, and that's the race that Bitcoin is winning. And there's no competition there, because there's no need for competition there, because all of the best ideas will be implemented into Bitcoin sooner or later. We just need to all agree that they're good ideas. And if they're not good, we won't all agree. So basically, Bitcoin is an agreement. Use it if you want to use it. But what bothers me is when people confuse this with other things that aren't this glorious thing that will go up forever, but that are other things that are temporary and might be interesting to someone for a short amount of time. I'm building I'm trying to get at some form of life insurance for my grandchildren here. I'm not trying to get rich off of the stock market. I'm not trying to move fast and break things. I think move slow and don't break things is a much better thing to live by. And the philosophical,
I think we're talking cross purposes though, because I think we agree. Yeah, because I think we agree on Bitcoin. My point is that as
so why
we
are we talking about shitcoins?
Well, no, because it came up, and if you're going to bring up a point that I disagree with, I'm going to say, look, you're my brother, you're my Bitcoin brother, but I disagree with you on this point, and this is why. And I think these things are healthy to debate. One of the things I've found sometimes is that certain areas of discussion amongst Bitcoiners are off topic, and you risk reputational damage by discussing these things, which in some ways I find sometimes kind of antithetical to the way Bitcoiners are. Because if we're talking about freedom, and we should be talking about the ability to discuss things, and I think if we are going to discuss certain issues, then we have to be honest. And like, if you say something I disagree with, then I'm going to say I disagree with it. But I think the thing is, the reason we're talking across purposes is because I agree with you on Bitcoin being the best form of money. I 100% agree with you. One area I do disagree with you is like that we can say with absolute certainty that there will never be anything better than Bitcoin. Bitcoin exists because of monetary competition, because there's so much bad money out there. Someone created a better money, which is Bitcoin. We can't say we might be able to say with 99.999%, but we can't say with 100% certainty that nothing. Well, till the end of time, till the sun expands and blows up, that Bitcoin will be the only form of money. There might be something else. No. Better than invented.
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that, but I am saying that there will never be a better cryptocurrency or ever be a better blockchain. If there's a better type of money, it will be something completely different, because you can't reproduce the discovery of absolute scarcity. If you do that, the point of a blockchain disappears, and everything crumbles. The house of cards will fall if that was ever to happen, because what's to ensure that won't happen again? If I can't hodl for 5 generations, but I need to trade every second generation because something else took over, there's no point in hodling, and then there's no point in Bitcoin, and then there's no point in the scarcity aspect. I mean, that's the basic thesis. You can't replicate this experiment. You can only discover America once. You can only discover Bitcoin once.
I think you're almost certainly right.
All right, almost certainly.
Yeah, almost certainly, because I just can't say absolutely. I think it's a dangerous game to play. Say with absolute certainty, it will be impossible for any other cryptocurrency ever to be created that will be better than Bitcoin. I think you're almost certainly right, but I can't say. I just would never say absolutely.
Okay, I wouldn't say anything absolutely either, because maybe we're all living in a simulation and whatever. So there's always a tiny chance that something weird will happen. I think with almost absolute certainty that if there's a better money in the future than Bitcoin, it will not be a cryptocurrency. It will be something else.
It will be something that's stored in our brains. The biological money
alien
stored
coin.
In our brains. Alien coin.
Well, Bitcoin already is that. But you can store Bitcoins in your brain. You already have that technology. Bitcoin enables that. You already have that.
Wow.
You don't need anything else. Well, maybe not your brain, but...
Yeah, maybe not my brain. Memorizing 24 words would be quite difficult. No, it's fine. 24 words would be hard for me. I'd forget some. It is that interesting concept, though, that you can travel around the world with the money just stored in 24 words that you remember.
Yeah, and knowing is owning in that sense. And not only the 24 words, but knowing about Bitcoin is owning Bitcoin. Like, knowing about these concepts is owning Bitcoin. Like, knowing people who are Bitcoiners is owning the world. Knowing is owning is a very powerful concept. And when you blur the line between knowing and owning, you make forceful seizure of other people's stuff a lot harder. And you make violence a lot less effective. If you kill me with my 24 words in my head, the 24 words go away and they enrich every other Bitcoiner by making Bitcoin even more scarce. Okay, thank you. But and then every other Bitcoiner gets richer. Every other Bitcoiner gets more influential over time. Every political decision gets more influenced by Bitcoiners. I mean, there's no way of losing this. If it works, if it keeps on doing what it does, there's no stopping this thing, because all the incentives are aligned. You can't kill it. It really is Roko's basilisks or Roko's honey badger or whatever you may call it. But it truly is unstoppable.
So why do you think it is that people struggle with it? And I'm talking a range of people, whether it's academics like Nassim Taleb, Noor Rabini, whether it's our friend Peter Schiff up here, or whether it's just our friends who we're down the pub with trying to explain Bitcoin to them. What is it that people struggle with?
I think it's because it really is too good to be true. Because people can't wrap their heads around that the concept of the value of an asset going up forever and not being able to go down in the long run. They just can't wrap their heads around that concept because it's too weird. And it really is too weird because it changes everything, absolutely everything, on a personal level, on a societal level, everywhere. It changes everything. And the next 10 years are going to be so interesting because we're going to see some weird shit. I mean, you were in the Santa, you talked to the president and all of this, and you're friends with Jack Mollers and all of these guys that are actually changing the world. And you know this. You know how absolutely awesome it is to go around in El Sonte and using the Lightning Network every day. You know how absolutely awesome it is that Jack is building these things that are accessible to everyone in the world. It's like I don't see anything stopping this. Stopping people from agreeing about a certain set of rules is a very hard thing. Stopping people from remembering 24 words is a very hard thing. Stopping people from using mathematics is a very hard thing. And I believe mathematics and praxeology wins in the end.
Yeah, I think the biggest problem for adoption for most people is the hurdle of volatility. Because if you first buy your Bitcoin at the start of a bull run, you have a very different experience. So if you bought your first Bitcoin about a year ago at $4,000 or $5,000, you're going to have a very different bias towards Bitcoin than the people who bought their first Bitcoin 3 months ago when it was at 64,000. Not because of the price they bought it at, but what's happened to the price since. It's a lot easier to be pro Bitcoin, excited, listen to podcasts, read articles when you've done a 10x than it is when you've had a 50% haircut. And I think that's the struggle. People always say, "Oh, I'm too late." You know, my friends who thought they were too late at 1,000, thought they were too late at 20,000, thought they're too late at 64,000. It's coming back to your point. They can't understand it's an asset that can go up in value forever. They always think they've missed out, and therefore they therefore don't take the next leap.
And I always try to tell them it was the same the first time I bought Bitcoin. I thought I was too late, and everyone always thinks they're too late. But what I tell people is basically buy Bitcoin, do not sell them before 5 years have passed. Like hold them for 5 years at least, and then you make your decision. And
Yeah,
that's
that's
usually
funny. I say 4. I always tell people,
with 4 you might miss the cycle.
Yeah, well, I think if in 4 years you usually get at least one cycle, but it takes like 4 to 5 years for a Bitcoin to mature.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, and it's like a wine. It grows. Its value grows with its age, right? A fine wine.
Oh yeah, I like that. I'm going to steal that one. So you talk about things are going to get weird, and we're going to see a lot of changes. What kind of things are you thinking about here? Because one of the things on my mind is that I worry about, and I know some people say don't, or say you're a fucking socialist or stop caring, whatever it is. But one of the things I worry about is this hyper-Bitcoinization transition where other currencies die and people move to Bitcoin will be a bloody transition, and it will be a potentially violent transition. And the reason I say that is we've seen what happens when wealth inequality grows. We see revolutions, we see demonstrations, we see protests, we see death, we see destruction. And we've seen this again and again. The transition from a fiat-based world to a Bitcoin-based world is going to have winners and losers, and there is going to be, at certain periods in time, people are going to see their fiat currency collapse while Bitcoin goes up. And maybe they don't hold it, and maybe they become angry towards it. So, and it's a very different world from what we've had for certainly my entire lifetime and the entire lifetime of my parents. One of the things I keep thinking about is how does that transition happen? If it moves to smaller government, whilst it's something many of us support, how does that transition look? Like, does the world get really fucking weird for a period of time?
Yes, my answer to that is this: the world will get weirder and weirder anyway, and and without Bitcoin, we wouldn't have a transition. We would just have a crash, and then there would be losers and losers, and nothing else. Because the crash is coming regardless of whether Bitcoin exists or not. Every fiat currency is hyperinflating, just at different rates. So we will all become Lebanon or Venezuela at some point in time. It's just a matter of time, because you can't keep the current machine working without an ever-growing GDP, and that means you need more and more currency every year, and we're all on the same path. All fiat currencies have a limited lifetime. They die at some point. Those people who hold Bitcoin, in Bitcoin, there will be winners and winners, and no losers. As long as you hold Bitcoin, you will not be a loser.
For 5 years.
You might for 5 years. You might lose your fiat in the process, but this goes back to the Willy Woo statistic there about the number of small holders and people with less than 1 Bitcoin, people with less than 10 Bitcoin. Those numbers are growing. So it is, when you say wealth gaps and all of these things that usually start pitchfork riots, that is actually Bitcoin is distributing wealth across to poor people. It is working. It is doing exactly what the central bank says it does, but it's working by doing the exact opposite of what the central bank is doing. If the more expensive the money is to produce, the cheaper the prices of everything else in comparison to that type of money, and vice versa. So the cheaper the money is to produce, the more expensive everything else gets, and that's what we're living in now. And everyone has a harder and harder time because money gets devalued all the time. With Bitcoin, it's the exact opposite. As long as you have any Bitcoin, your purchasing power will go up over time. So it's the only way to have a transition at all. Without Bitcoin, we would just have darkness, civil wars, and nothing hopeful to look forward to. Now there's actually something really hopeful to look forward to. I don't know what the transition looks like. What I do know is that it's much harder for people to take people's wealth by force if they have Bitcoin. It's much harder to force people to do stuff they don't want to do if they're Bitcoiners. If Bitcoin, in a world that Bitcoin exists, violence gets more expensive. So I try to be an optimist. How can you stop people from agreeing on a fair set of rules that everyone agrees on are fair? You can't stop an idea. You can't stop an idea whose time has come. And this is it. So I believe in a very bright future because of the elimination of violence from the equation. And I think it might be a lot better than people think, because people tend to have that's true for all times. People see new inventions and transitions to new technologies and stuff like, oh, it's dangerous, it's going to kill us all, and AI robots are going to take over everything, and but people thought that about the vacuum cleaner as well. I mean, it'll probably be positive, all positive. So
they thought the vacuum cleaner was dangerous. An army of vacuum cleaners was going to take over the world.
Maybe the vacuum cleaner wasn't the best example in the world, but you get the drift.
I do, man. I do. Yeah. So what do you think is going to be some of the biggest changes that we will see, though? I mean, I know for me personally that my considerations for what I spend money on has changed drastically. I save more, I spend less, and when I do spend, it's on something I really, really fucking want, right? That is one of the considerations I've had. So that I guess is going to make a difference to what society produces, because what we demand will change.
Definitely, and it's a much needed change because right now there are piles of garbage everywhere because we give each other bullshit, Chinese bullshit for Christmas presents and everything all the time, and we're expected to bring gifts here and there when gifts are really pointless in a world as abundant as the one we live in because stuff is cheap, life quality is not. Uh, so, so more and more people, when you onboard more bitcoins, I mean, we all search for something, a better life, more meaningful life, better spiritual life, if you will. And you find that through Bitcoin because your time preference changes in the way you describe there, and because people crave less bullshit and more genuine things and more truthful things. So
Has Bitcoin changed you?
a lot. Of course it has. I just quit my day job, or I quit my day job a
Sweet.
couple of months back. Yeah, so
What did you used to do?
I was the crew manager for an offshore shipping company.
Wow.
So I have around responsibility for around 250 employees, mostly CTVs, crew transfer vessels to wind farms in the North Sea.
So you now have control of that other scarce asset, time.
So it wasn't a bad job at all, and I have no beef with my former employees at all. So it was just like the time to move on had come. So I did my last day in the office yesterday.
Yesterday,
with mixed
wow!
feelings driving away.
Congratulations,
Yeah,
dude.
thank
Listen,
you.
you've got control of time now.
I do. I hope. Well, I have a family.
Yeah, well, but that's positive. Like you've swapped work time for family time. Like, are you planning now just to be Bitcoin only, content creator, yada yada? Like, you're not planning to get another job?
No, I'm becoming Peter McCormack 2.0. That's my plan.
The Swedish Pete McCormack. Hey man, listen, how are things over in Sweden?
In what regard?
Well, so when you go on Twitter and you see people debating lockdowns versus no lockdowns and yada yada, a lot of Bitcoiners will bring up Sweden as the example as a country that basically avoided lockdowns, had a much more liberal approach. Do we get to see the real truth?
Yeah, I think it's some, if not most of it, stems from an inability to act at all on part of our government. They're so slow, and they're no, they're not very effective. So they were sort of late to the ball when it came to lockdowns. But then again, I think they also listen a lot to the advisors, and we happen to have quite a good advisor. I mean, we had a lot of COVID deaths. A lot of old people died. Whether that's a good or a bad thing in relationship to how much lockdowns we didn't have, that's a different discussion. But I'm certainly happy that I could take more responsibility for myself. I mean, it was no problem for me to work from home in the beginning when no one knew anything about the disease or anything. I just wanted to keep me and my family safe, and it was a good excuse to take the kids out of the brainwashing institution for a while. So we did that for a couple of months. But
are they going back?
Then we all unfortunately, but they're going to a different school in another country now.
Wow.
I think I shouldn't really dox where, but those who know.
But you're shipping them off.
But yeah, sort of. Well, we're going there too, so and it's a Scandinavian school, so.
Okay. Wow. Well, you can tell me another time, man. You tell me another time. Over
yeah,
a beer
sure.
Or something. Listen, there's another thing we have to talk about. One more subject. You know what it is, right?
All right. Yeah, I have a lot of time, so however long.
No, but you know what the other thing is we have to talk about?
Mexico?
We have to talk about your musical career.
Okay, all right. My former musical career.
Or maybe listen, that was a surprise.
What did you hear? I guess you heard the Driven song from Lure at the Beast.
Yeah, I can't remember the song someone sent me, and it was one of those situations you're like, oh shit, am I gonna have to pretend I like this? And because I don't want to make that person feel bad, and I was put it on, I was like, this fucking rocks.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, well, I've been in several bands through the years, and I haven't had the time to do that much music lately. It's sort of when that band ended, I needed another creative output because I'm sort of a creative person who needs to put stuff out there, and so I started writing about Bitcoin instead. But now that I have more time on my hands, I might make some music again. I mean, I made this "Fuck You Money" song that got kind of popular on Bitcoin Twitter. Did you see that?
Yeah, but how big? Sorry, I'm more fascinated with the bands. Like, how big did you get? Did you tour?
No, we didn't tour. We got a record contract, and the thing was we made that song or that album by ourselves, and we made the video by ourselves with a friend, and
Uh-huh.
then we uploaded it on some site, and it got someone in the someone working with the Pirate Bay discovered it, and so it was featured on. They had something called a promo bay for a while. I mean, I don't know when the last time you used the Pirate Bay was, but I guess everyone used it like 15 years ago. So it got promoted there for 3 days. It was up for 3 days and got around 100,000 views on YouTube. And
Wow.
that was the first time I ever saw something actually going sort of viral on the internet that I was involved in. So I sort of saw the potential for it. Like if you can only get something, an idea or something creative out there that people catch. I saw the potential in the in social media and the internet there. I guess, but yeah.
You didn't get to ever share a stage with Europe, did you?
We only played in Sweden, mostly in
Europe is
Gothenburg.
Swedish.
But we got out. We got out of Gothenburg at least, but only small venues and nothing big.
Then my first album I ever owned was a Europe album.
Oh, the Final Countdown.
No, it was the album after that had Superstition on it. Let me find
Oh
it.
yeah.
Europe disc.
They have a fascinating story too. Yeah, we have to grab a beer and talk music someday. Yeah,
We will do. Yeah, it was the album. The first, my dad came home on cassette and brought me Out of This World because they had released the Final Countdown song and I loved it. And then he bought me that cassette. I mean, they've been going forever.
Yeah. I guess we're
10.
about the same age, so I grew up with Europe as well, and like
Europe, Bon Jovi.
Twisted Sisters, We're Not Gonna Take It was really big in Sweden.
Motley Crue, Warrant. Were you into Cherry Pie?
Yeah, I like Cherry Pie, but I wasn't into any other any of the other glam rock. I really liked Guns N' Roses when they came, and of course all the I was a big grunge fan, so I liked Soundgarden a lot, and I still do.
Oh man, Chris Cornell killed himself. That really. Oh man, still can't believe that.
That was depressing.
Yeah. Well, Alice in Chains were my favorite. They're my favorite grunge band. Absolutely love
excellent.
Alice in Chains. I've got a tattoo of Lane Staley here, actually.
So when are you getting everything divided by 20 million tattoo? Like when you got one right there.
You know, I don't have a Bitcoin tattoo.
This is the one you should get, right?
Yeah.
Like if I convince you to do this right now live.
Maybe. Let me think about it. I'll think about it. I probably should get a Bitcoin tattoo at some point, man. I should do it. Well, listen, look, we didn't talk about exactly what we planned to talk about, but I think it was a healthy discussion, and I'm probably going to get shouted at. But I'm glad we did it. Listen, where do people find your books? Where do they follow your videos? Tell them where to follow all that shit you're doing, because it's really useful.
Yeah, my main Bitcoin content is on Twitter and on Mastodon, and I'm at Knut Svanholm on Twitter, and also on Telegram, where I have a Telegram channel these days. You can find my books on Amazon, and also translations on them. available from the Consensus Network and from Apricot Media. I'm happy to announce that I'm the editor of the Swedish version of the Bitcoin Standard. I'm having a collaboration with the folks at Consensus Network there. So looking forward to that. Start working on that.
We'll stick
like
that all in the. Do you know what? I think we've operated with a delay this whole interview.
Oh.
I thought we had someone can fix it. I think we have. Danny will have that. He'll fix that. Well, listen, look, I'll put it all in the show notes. Hopefully, I'm going to see you at some point, dude.
Don't miss the videos. There's a new one coming out soon. No. If you search for everything divided by 21 million, you'll find the video and the other videos. The Joni Appelberg's YouTube channel is highly recommended.
Thank you, Joni. Well, listen, we'll put it all in the show notes, man. Hopefully, Danny will fix the delay issue that I think we've had. Appreciate talking to you, man. You're always welcome on the show. It's always a good chat. That's 2 we've done now, and let's try and do one in person at some point. You can tell me where you'll be, and we'll hang out. We'll have a beer. We'll talk rock and roll and do it in person.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, and looking forward to everything.
To everything being divided by 21 million. Peace out, brother.
Yeah. Peace.